discuss. So, Jivitam Sukham Artham Cha. Jivitam is life itself, life, happiness, and wealth. All of them, dharma heto parityajya. And for the purpose of dharma, you give it all up. So, this is Mother Sita speaking in a expression of lamentation, horror, distress when she is being abducted by Ravan. So, that, oh, she's calling out to Ram, oh Lord, oh Ram, for the sake of dharma, you gave up everything. And yet, now what is happening? Riyamanam adharmedma. At Riyamanam, I am being abducted by the personification of adharma. Adharmedma and Raghav napashyasi. And yet you are not here to see, you are not here to behold. For the sake of dharma, you gave up everything. But right now, when adharma is happening to me, you are not here to protect dharma. How can such a thing happen? Jivitam sukham artham cha dharma heto parityajan riyamanam adharme mam raghava na pashyasi. Jivitam sukham artham cha dharma heto parityajan viyamanam adharme mam raghava na pashyasi. Jivitam sukham artham cha dharma heto parityajan Riyamanam adharme mam raghava na pashyasi. Together one last time. Jivitam sukham artham cha dharma heto parityajan Riyamanam adharme mam raghava na pashyasi. Om Jnanatimirandasya Jnananjanashalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Namo Vishnupadaya Krishna Krishnaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Dinamite Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Ashtantra Deshatadi Vanchakutarudhascha Vipasindhudhayascha Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadharam Srivastava Goloka Dham Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama Hare Krishna. Thank you very much once again for coming today. So it's okay. I kept it down. No, I'll take it away. So today I'll discuss broadly on the topic of how boundaries can protect from distress. The incident broadly is, we all know the incident in Ravan comes and abducts Sita. So I'll start with first two terms. There is adversity and there is atrocity. Do these two terms sound similar or different to you? Similar. Similar or different or similarly different? Okay. Okay. So what is the difference?
Adversity could be just a negative situation. Atrocity is really like a thermal, atrocious.
Okay. It's you're on the right track. A little more specific.
Yeah, negative thing, something bad that you have to go through, and then an atrocity is something bad or harmful.
Yeah, a little bit, very much close now. So negative thing done to you, you can say. So what is the difference still? It's almost there. Done to you, that is a difference. But what does it mean? A little more specific. Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I think so.
Is this adversity or adversity?
I think atrocity kind of is a big
Yeah, నేను పైన టాప్ మార్చుకోవడం ఏం లేదు ఎక్కువ రెడ్
Okay. So, like, yeah, we could say in one sense, if we consider a big circle, this adversity is like a bigger circle. Atrocity is a subset within adversity. Now, can somebody say what is the difference? This is just a hint. Almost so that you got it right, right? It's done to you. That is there very much in it. Okay, let's put it this way: Sita being abducted by Ravan. Is it adversity or atrocity? Atrocity. Okay, good. You got it. So what is the key difference over here? Cruelty. Okay. Yeah, it's almost there. Little more specific. Cruelty, what does it involve?
physical abuse
Not
or issues.
physical atrocity means basically something done by someone else.
Yes, that is the key thing. Adversity is just a bad thing happening. So, for example, we are on the road and suddenly a person ahead, their car brake fails and their car comes and hits us. That's adversity. But if somebody is malicious, maybe that person is a racist or a sexist or something like that, and that person deliberately drives their car towards us, that is an atrocity. So we could say the key difference is adversity is it's more of there is a personal agent over there. So in the Bhagavatam also, when Bhishma Pitama sees Yudhishthir Maharaj, the first verse he speaks when he's on the deathbed in 1.9, Aho kashtam aho anyayam yad yuyam dharmanandana. So kashta and anyaya, they're two different things. So what is kashta? Adversity. Anyaya is atrocity. So among adversity and atrocity, which is more difficult to bear? Atrocity. Why is it? Yes, exactly. Because when we see someone doing something, how can somebody do like this? Why is this person against me? And so it becomes much more difficult to bear. So in general philosophy, evil is considered to be of two kinds: natural evil and moral evil. Natural evil is basically where, say, a flood comes, and because of flood, a whole city gets, or a part of the city gets inundated. But a moral evil is where some person who was the constructor who was supposed to build the dam, they used substandard material, and because of which the dam broke down, and then that caused the city to get inundated. So it was not just a flood; it was human error, and not so much human error as more like human malfeasance. It was error done because of evil intention. So atrocity is much more difficult to do. And for all of us, when we in our lives, we will all face difficulties. And especially say if there's a recession and we lose our job, that's adversity. But if there's some political backbiting against us and because of which some rumors are spread and then we are fired because of that, that's what? Atrocity. So if we look in scripture, quite often what is depicted is scripture teaches us through examples. And often the examples that are depicted are of not so much adversity as atrocity. So we have here Ravan coming and deliberately, there's a whole conspiracy there to try to abduct Sita. So it is not just a happenstance, just by chance something happened. It is all very evilly orchestrated. So we will look at this from two parts, or rather we can say three broad parts. See, we could say there are two kinds of people in the world. Some people are wise and there are otherwise. So those are wise, we could say that they are of the divine nature, Daivi Prakriti. So this is people who have goodness. Here I'm not necessarily using the word of goodness, but it is they have virtue within them. These are the people who have virtue. They have good character. And actually otherwise is a very broad category. So in this, we can say there are broadly two categories of people. There are people who are outright wickedness. Wickedness means these are the people who will cause atrocities, who will do atrocities to others. So and then there are people who have weakness. Now, weakness, so goodness, weakness, and wickedness. So now the difference between weakness and wickedness is that in the case of weakness, so in both the otherwise people, there is wise. There is wise means we have lust, anger, greed, these are wise. But in the case of weakness, we can say wise is occasional. A good person does a bad thing. Whereas in wickedness, wise is regular. So for example, consider, say, there are two major bad things that happen in the Ramayana. Two adversities befall Ram. So one of them, can you guess which are the two major things? Kaikai sentencing, Kaikai having Ram banished, and then Sita being abducted. So now, in the case of Kaikai, is she having weakness or wickedness? Weakness. Yes. She's a good person, but at that particular time, she's overcome. So when they are overcome, sometimes people with weakness can seem to be like people with wickedness during that period. But the key difference is that they regret. They regret and then they try to reform. But people with wickedness, do they regret? The only thing they regret is if they didn't do wickedness cleverly enough that they could get away. So once a person was speeding very fast, this pulled him over. You're going very fast. You didn't go fast enough to get away from me. So the idea is wickedness is far more dangerous. So now in the Ramayana, there is interplay of different characters. And we could say, if we put a broad spectrum of characters, goodness, weakness, and wickedness. So these are all three different characters. So we have the Daivi Prakriti, which is goodness. The Asuri Prakriti is wickedness. At most, human beings exist somewhere in between. We would like to go towards the Daivi Prakriti, towards goodness, towards virtue, but we are sometimes pulled down. So now, if we consider, when say there's somebody with goodness, somebody who's normally virtuous, and at the other extreme, there is somebody with wickedness. So when these two people interact, there are two possibilities. Suppose there's an interaction between those two people. One is that the person who's in goodness, the person in goodness inspires the person with wickedness to come towards goodness. It elevates the other person. But the other possibility is the opposite. That the person who is having wicked quality, that person, by that person's association, the person with goodness goes down. And we could say this same applies to the other two categories also. We could say a person with goodness can go towards weakness, and a person with weakness can come towards goodness. A person with weakness can also go towards wickedness. And a person with wickedness may also they may also get elevated. So this human nature, these characteristics are not fixed. They are changeable. In the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna uses the word abhijatasya. Abhijatasya means we are born with qualities. But although it says we are born with qualities, abhijatasya, that does not necessarily mean we are stuck with these qualities forever. So some people have a godly nature. That is, they have a lot of goodness with them. And that's great. But that does not necessarily mean that that's how they will stay throughout their life. They may go down there. And some people who are wicked, they may also rise upwards. But there is a starting point. So abhijatasya, when you're born with, means we all have a particular starting point. And why is the starting point important? Because we need to know where we are before we can go somewhere. Say, if I'm driving and I'm lost, I need to know, okay, what is my current location? Say, you want to go from here to the temple, this corner. So then, the first thing we need to know is not just the destination, but the current location. So to some extent, some self-awareness is required. So for all of us, we all want to be happy in life. We all want to be meaningfully happy in life. And while we all focus on gaining more wealth, more comforts, more facilities, more prestige, more power, and that is important to some extent. But what is much more important is that our inner character rise upwards. So we could say, when we want to progress in life, what we focus on is, we consider there's the external and there's the internal. In externals, we may want to rise from poverty to prosperity. Or we may want to rise from anonymity to fame. This is what we think about as progressing in life. And yes, these are resources which are important. But if we want real happiness, we need to rise internally from wherever we are, wickedness to weakness towards goodness. If this inner journey is not happening, then we may get the externals also. So a person who is wicked, that person may get a lot of wealth. But what is going to happen is they will abuse their wealth, hurt others, and maybe even to hurt themselves. So that person will always be craving with greed. On the other hand, somebody is having weakness. Say somebody is just come to their teenage years, come to youth, and suppose that person starts exploring drugs and gets hooked to drugs. So that is weakness. And suppose somehow at that time that person will say wins a lottery. Or maybe some grandfather, grandmother passes away and they leave their inheritance to that person. Now You could say normally moving from poverty to prosperity is good, but that may be the worst thing for them at that time. If we have inner weakness coupled with outer wealth, then they may use or abuse that wealth or just getting more and more addicted. If they didn't have that wealth, there would be some limitation to how much they would act on their wealth. So, Mr. Prabhupada writes in a 14th canto, 14th chapter, Bhavita Purport, that in the past, primarily human progress was measured in these terms. This journey was considered more important. How is one's character evolved from where we are towards higher? Now, in the present, this is what is considered most important. That, okay, how famous are you becoming? How wealthy are you becoming? And yes, it's not that having fame or wealth is a problem, but having these things without having a growth in inner character, it's not going to lead to happiness. Either we will succumb to vices, or so one is that somebody is alcoholic, and that person, just as I said, alcoholic or drug addict, if they succumb to that, they become addicted. The other is a person who is wicked, then that person will specifically target. Okay, where are people who are weak? Some people are drug peddlers, and they will go and deliberately find vulnerable people, and they will target those people. So, in many ways, where the Ramayana is, while it is Lord Ram's journey, it is his journey through like Ayan is journey. It is also the journey of various characters. And some characters in their journey rise upwards and some go downwards. Of course, some are down and they go further down. That is also possible. So in particular cases, so what we need to do is that if we are to rise upwards, what all is required for that? That is what we will try to discuss today. So at any point during the class, if you have any questions, feel free to ask the questions. And I'll feel free to not answer them. So mutual freedom. So basically, that if the question is not immediately relevant, or if you want to answer a little later, it's going to be answered a little later in the talk and answered at that time. Otherwise, we can discuss later. Yes.
I didn't interrupt you earlier, but since you, how would in the adversity and atrocity, how would the circumstances that Lord Rama and Sita Devi had to go through, that she had to be sent away because of that washerman's comments? How does that fit into all this? Is that an adverse condition? Or is that not negative?
See, sometimes it's not so easy to put something in black and white.
Well,
Lord Sita being sent away toward the end of her life. That is more of a, like person's comment was a trigger. So it was more in the category of an adversity. It was, did that work? It is, yeah, I would say what they call adversity.
okay, thank you.
Sometimes it's difficult. The broad category is reasonable to understand, but sometimes what happens is something is adversity, but we may blame somebody. And then we may consider it to be an atrocity. So somebody say, sometimes things happen because of somebody's oversight, somebody's mistake, some terrible things happen. Maybe somebody leaves the door open and some robbers come and vandalize the whole place. They have robbed the whole house. Now, there's a mistake over there. But the person who left the door open, they did not want to do that. So it's more of an adversity. So now, when we are going through a life journey, generally people who are wicked, and there will be people who are wicked in life. Now they will try to exploit others. They will try to, for their own ulterior ends, they will try to bring atrocities on others. So in one sense, Ram and Sita were living peacefully in the forest. But Ravan had his own selfish agenda. He wanted to fulfill his own selfish desire, lusty desire. And that's why he came and abducted Sita. So what do we do in such situation? So in general, for a person to be protected, there have to be boundaries. So this boundaries relates to one particular theme in the Ramayana, in the related this pastime only. What comes to your mind when you use the word boundaries? Yeah, that's my right. So we'll talk about that. Now there could be at one level social boundaries, and there can be personal boundaries. I'll explain the difference right between these two. When we say social boundaries, what it essentially means is that there are certain boundaries which are generally imposed by society, imposed or expected in society. So, for example, society may have certain laws, or these may come from laws, these may also come simply from customs or culture. So, for example, there's a law to private property. So, somebody cannot just enter into somebody else's house and take something from it. So inside their house, that's their property. Now, custom could be, say, when two people talk with each other in different countries, in different cultures, and two people talk with each other, there's different amount of distance that people keep. That sometimes some people they come very close to each other and talk. And in some cultures, people keep a little distance. And two people from opposing cultures come together. So what happens? It's like one person is coming closer and closer, the person going backward and backward. So there's a natural social personal we could say social distance that is there. So now the word social distancing came before the pandemic. That was a different thing. But there are some customs, and these are also at one level meant to protect. Now beyond that, each individual, based on their particular weaknesses, they may need to decide what are their personal boundaries. So, if somebody is an alcoholic, then they may decide that I can't have any, even if say they live in a society where everybody is alcoholic, I will never go into a bar. Or I won't have my house. If somebody not the alcoholic, they're a recovering alcoholic. Then they will try to keep, they cannot, if they want to be serious about recovering from alcoholism, they cannot have their house right next to a bar. So they don't need those boundaries. So in one sense, essentially when we're talking about boundaries, what are we talking about over here is that if we consider this is the person, and then this is the provocation. The provocation can be in any sense. It can be, so we need a boundary between the two. So the boundary basically is you can imagine this to be a wall, not just a pathway, some kind of wall which stops. So we need boundaries. And to the extent these boundaries are there, to that extent, there is safety. The boundaries are not necessarily the final safety. Boundaries have to be first constructed, then they also have to be maintained or defended. But boundaries help in protection. And so I started by talking first about atrocity and versus difference. And atrocities are often done by people who are wicked. So when we are functioning in life, at one level, we all need to construct boundaries for protecting ourselves. And when a person is interacting with someone, generally when we interact with a new person, depending on our nature, we might be very open and outgoing. Sometimes we will be a little reserved and introvert kind of. But then as we interact with the person, generally, initially we may have our defenses high. When we come to know the person, and gradually our defenses start lowering. We start With a new person, we might be a little reserved. But then after we started talking freely, when we say, hey, this person seems to be a good person. So whenever there are boundaries, in one sense, if a relationship is to be built, with this person A and person B, the one thing is the boundary and the other is the bonds. So boundaries are what create a distance between people. Bonds are what link people. And there are some people with whom we need bonds so that we can come closer to them. And there are some people with whom we need boundaries. Unfortunately, our mind makes us do the opposite. So people with whom we need bonds, we end up building boundaries. And people with whom we need boundaries, we try to develop too strong bonds with them. Sometimes people who constantly criticize us, we miss. Almost like our mind perversely thinks, I'll spend no time with them, I'll try to please this person. I'll try to somehow get some compliment from this person. But then some people, their nature is such that they're never going to praise or appreciate us. It's more likely that we are installed in the Sahara than they're going to praise from their mouth. So it is, you could say in one sense, if we can say intelligence or wisdom, it is to know where we should have bonds and know where to have boundaries. So it is basically where to have. Similarly, where to have boundaries. So this is intelligence which each one of us needs in our day-to-day life. Otherwise, we will just, our relationships and our interaction with people will become very intense. At some level, unconsciously we do that. If some people are very negative, constantly radiating negativity and criticism of everyone, we may decide to keep a distance from this person. Now, some people are very judgmental. Everything that they see, they just have some very negative comment to pass. And then I used to wonder, if two judgmental people come together, what happens? There's always passing negative comment about you. It's curious that quite often when two judgmental people come together, they become very good friends. Why? Because they don't judge each other, they judge the world together. So this erecting these boundaries, constructing such boundaries is important for us. And now sometimes these boundaries may seem to interfere in our function. Now, yes, it is possible that the boundaries may interfere, but it is important that boundaries be there. Because without boundaries, then nobody knows how to function. There is a principle of boundaries and there is the practice of boundaries. The practice of boundaries may vary if you consider this as boundaries. There is the principle and there is the practice. So the principle is something which is universal. The practice may be contextual. It will depend on culture, it will depend on time, place, circumstance. So consider, for example, in the past, if we consider at a basic level, say the male-female interaction. In the past, men and women would broadly function in different social spaces. Women would have their own, a home would be their primary space, and it's not just the home. From the home, women would do their, sometimes women would also have some work. Pre-industrialization, the home and the workplace were not so rapidly separate, so drastically separate. So we see even in the Ramli, even in Krishna Lila, we have, there's a fruit seller. The gopis themselves are selling butter and milk and other things. But mostly it was, they had their space and then that was the space where men operated. Now today's world is significantly different. Now men and women may operate in the same space. They work in the same places, travel in the same trains. But still, whatever be the culture, there is some distance. There is some boundaries. Today, people may interact very freely with each other. But still, there are boundaries. There are some, if you start staring at someone constantly, it's considered impolite. So, say for a male and female interaction, a physical interaction, in the past, the dharma or marriage was the boundary. Now, marriage may not be the boundary, but consent is the boundary. So, if that boundary is violated, it's considered a serious crime. So, the point is, boundaries are always required. And the problem comes if boundaries are not clear. This could happen in any interaction, among friends also, among relatives also. Say two relatives, one relative just comes unannounced to another relative's place. Yeah, various relatives. And they just think, yeah, your home, my home, we're all relatives, just come together. Other relatives say, okay, couldn't you have just made one phone call and told me that you're coming? So there are boundaries. When the boundaries are not understood, when the boundaries are not defined, that can lead to a lot of discomfort. Even when there is no bad intention. And when there is actual bad intention, then things can become even more complicated, even more troubling. So when Sita was in the forest, at that time, Ram and Lakshman, they would be there with either one of them or both of them would be there. They would protect her. So it was a place of danger. And even before they went to the forest, Lord Ram actually told Sita that how dangerous the forest would be. And Sita said, no, I want to be with you. And Lord Ram was happy that she was there to meet him. But they were all aware of the danger. And now in this particular situation, a particular conspiracy was created by which Lord Ram and Lakshman both were drawn away from Sita. That was through the Maricha. First he appeared as a deer. So Maricha as a deer, appearing like a deer, Maricha drew Ram away. And then speaking like a human, Maricha drew Lakshman away. He spoke not just as a human, he spoke in the voice of Ram itself. So Maricha was a wizard, he was a disguiser. So in a deer garb, so deer form, he drew Ram away. And then in a human voice, he cried out, Lakshman, Sita. And through that, he drew Lakshman away. Now when Lakshman was going away, he built Lakshman Rekha. And around Sita, he requested her, please don't go out of this moment. He infused it with some mystical power by which anybody who tried to go over it would be scorched by fire. And Sita was okay. But then, as soon as Lakshman had disappeared, Ram came up. And Ram was wicked. There is wicked people. For them, nothing is sacred. And even something sacred can be used, something holy can be used for an utterly unholy purpose. So he came in the form of a holy man, a mendicant. And he said, please give me alms. When he said that, he said, he's welcome, please wait for some time. My husband will come and I'll serve. He said, I'm very hungry right now. You come and give me some. Please wait. My husband will come. If you don't give, I'll leave. And you are going to make a Brahmana. Very Brahman. You will get the curse. You will be destroyed. You will be the cause of a curse befalling everyone in your family. So he exploited Sita's goodness. Sita had a good attitude, it was a service attitude. Okay, this saintly person should be serving the saintly person. But that was what was exploited. Then Sita came out. Now, in one sense, as soon as she came out, she was abducted. This, at one level, can seem horribly unfair. It's like we do something bad, and then something bad happens to us. That is understandable. Like, even when we do something bad and something bad happens to us, still we feel bad about it. Why did this happen? Isn't it? But if we do something good and then something bad happens to us, that is especially difficult to bear. So somebody is in need of money and we give them some money. And then instead of being grateful to us for the money that we give them, they implicate us in a crime. Unfair, how blatantly unfair this is. Yes, at one level, yes. But at another level, through the Ramayana, actually, the harsh reality of the world is being depicted. So there is, when we conduct our behavior, there is being good and being shrewd. So shrewd can mean, it has two different meanings. One meaning is being clever and being cunning. So we are using the word shrewd not in the sense of cunning, but in being clever, in insightful. If somebody shrewd, okay, that means they look beyond appearance. Okay, you're speaking so sweetly to me, but what's really going on in them? So when we have to function in the world, it is important to be good, but our goodness should not be at the expense of our shrewdness. There are people who are, just because we are good, does not mean that people are going to be good to us. To expect that because I am good, people will be good to me. It's like expecting a wild bull to be kind with us because we are vegetarian. Well, the bull is wild, it doesn't care. So it's good to be vegetarian, but being a vegetarian doesn't mean that a wild bull is not going to attack us. So it is important to be good, but we can't presume that everybody is going to be good. And now here there's one important, I'll conclude with 2 points and we can have further questions. One point will be short and one point will be slightly bigger. First is, see, there is a difference between blaming someone and pointing out a wrong choice. It is, Sita is not to be blamed over here for the abduction. The abduction was entirely due to Ravan. It was Ravan who was wicked. But while Ravan was wicked, it is to be understood that wicked people are going to be there in society. And we have to ourselves have proper boundaries in our life to protect ourselves. So it is to blame or shame the victim is obnoxious. It should never be done. Okay, but at the same time, protecting ourselves requires intelligence. And there is a difference between, say when we are, again, when we are behaving in life, there is a question of rights and there is a question of what is right. What do I mean? That suppose we have a lot of money with us and we stuff all our pockets with the money, and the money is almost half of it is coming out of our pocket. We get a $1,000 bill coming from upper pocket, $1,000 from the bottom pocket, and it's all bulging out. And then we go out through a dark alley. Then some thug comes and robs us. And then we go to the police and complain. So when we go to the police and complain, it's my money, it's my right. Whatever I want, I can do. And it's not a question of rights over there. Yes, it's your money. The question is that you can say when it's my right to do whatever I want with my money. It is true at one level. But the point is that in the world, when we function in the real world, there are dangers. And it's important for each person to recognize the dangers and focus on what is right. Right means what is intelligent, what is common sense. So in this particular incident, now Sita, if the Buddha said, if this sage is really a sage, would a sage really want me to violate the principle of, put myself in danger like that? If he's really a sage, can't he wait for a few minutes? Buddha sage actually curse somebody just because they're not serving food. She's not saying, she's not telling him to go away. She's not cursing him. She's not insulting him. She's just respectful telling him to wait for a few minutes. Now, for her to come out, that was, Sita was having goodness. But in that particular time, there was a moment of weakness. So the weakness was, generally we think of weakness as some vice taking over. So it could be somebody succumbs to anger, somebody succumbs to greed, and that is weakness. But sometimes an excess of goodness can also be exploited. That means service attitude is good. Giving charity is good. But suppose somebody has, we give some money to somebody, we give somebody some money in charity to somebody. And that maybe we know that person and want to help them. And that's good. But if we find out that person has just used it to gamble and lost all the money, and they say, can you give me more? Now, at that time, being charitable is good. But in that particular point, being charitable may be harmful. We're simply enabling the vice of that person. So generally, weakness can result from both things. Generally, it comes through vice rising within a person. That it says anger or greed or something increases. But it can also be virtue becoming excessive. So an excess of kindness, excess of charitability, that can be harmful. So, for example, here, parents always want to protect their children. But say a child wants to learn to ride a cycle. And the parents say, oh, if my child falls down while cycling, he'll get injured. I'll never let him step on a cycle. Well, protection is good, but overprotection is a problem. Isn't it? It is a responsibility of parents to protect. But overprotection can actually stunt the growth. So too much of a good thing can also become a bad thing. The same lesson actually comes in the Mahabharata also. In the Mahabharata, when Rajasuya Yajna is performed, at that time Vyasadeva tells Yudhishthira Maharaj that, so Yudhishthira Maharaj seeks the blessings of Vyasadeva, and he says, it is by your grace that this yajna has been performed. Please bless me so that I can rule virtuously. He says, O king, I see turbulence in the future. It's like we are going in a plane, they say, turbulence is coming, tighten your seatbelts. So it's like turbulence is coming. I see turbulence. He says that there is going to be a great war. And after the war, you will reign peacefully. And Yudhishthira starts thinking that how can I prevent this war? So he starts thinking, he does his own reasoning in this, that actually war is caused by conflicts. And conflicts are caused by disagreements. Disagreement is verbal, conflict is start actually finding. It says disagreement, he does his own reasoning. Disagreement is caused by disobedience. Generally, when two people disagree, if there is some authority, we listen to the authority, the disagreement can be ended. But if there is disobedience to the authority, then the disagreements will escalate. Therefore, he says, he takes a vow that I will always obey my elders. Now, obeying elders is an important lesson. But in his case, who are the elders? Is the Dhritarashtra. And Dhritarashtra, he is manipulated by Duryodhana, and then he's invited to he's not invited, he's almost instructed to come for a gambling match. And Yudhishthira has no desire to gamble. But he's bound by the vow that he's taken. And therefore, he ends up gambling. As soon as he enters, he says, if we gamble, we'll fight. Let's avoid gambling. Then Duryodhana says, are you afraid? If you're afraid, no need to gamble. He looks at Dhritarashtra, Dhritarashtra remains silent. The gambles that he uses. So obeying elders is an important virtue. But we also consider who are the elders here. What is their character? Once I gave this class, after that, generally after the class, I ask, what is the point that you like? So there was one young boy, he said, lesson I learned is obeying elders is dangerous. So we all take what we like from that. That is not the lesson I'm endorsing over here. The point I'm saying is obeying elders is important, no doubt. It's a good thing. But if we make a good thing into an absolute thing, okay, what is the nature of the elders? If they are my well-wishers and they're telling me to do something I don't like to do, that is maybe I should do it because it's good for me. But if they are not my well-wishers, if they are themselves attached, they are being manipulated, then maybe whether I should be obeying them or not, I have to at least think about it. So after the Kurukshetra war, or after the Vanvas gets over, then the Dhritarashtra tries to exploit that same vow. He knows that Yudhishthira has taken the vow. He tries to exploit that vow again. He sends Sanjay as a messenger to the Pandavas. The Pandavas are living in the kingdom of Virat. That's where they were in the Ajnatavas. And after that, when they stay on there because Virat's daughter Uttara is married to Arjuna's son, Abhimanyu. So for that, Drupada also comes there, Krishna also goes over there. And then Dhritarashtra sends the messenger over there. If it's Sanjay is the messenger. And he says, O king, he says that you are a virtuous person. And ultimately, the journey of life for all virtuous people is that after somebody is a grahastha, then they become a vanapasta. He says, you are so fortunate that your youth itself you take a vanapasta. Why do you want to become a grahastha? You're already living in the forest. Why do you want to fight with your own family to gain a kingdom which we will have to renounce eventually? Just live peacefully in the forest and avoid fighting. So now, Yudhishthir, by living 13 years in the forest, has become a hard-eyed realist. See, there has been idealist. It is good to have ideals, but our ideals should not blind us to reality. He's still respectful. But he says, oh Sanjay, where did you get the impression that I was causing this war? He said, I have no desire for war at all. He said, and as far as becoming Vanapastha is concerned, he said, we have a duty to our ancestors. Although we have married, we have to have children, we have to raise our children, we have to perpetuate our dynasty. That is our duty. And only when that duty is performed, then I can renounce the war. So it is, I have no desire to fight the war. I only desire to perform my duty. So here, what he does is, he doesn't give the absolute status, ultimate status to the idea of obeying elders. So he's shrewd over here. And then he speaks to persuade, Sanjay himself gets persuaded. And Sanjay goes and he tells Dhritarashtra. Although Sanjay is the servant and Dhritarashtra is the king, he says, okay, king. He says something like, although he says that although you cannot see, but Yudhishthir saw through your schemes. So I couldn't persuade you. So basically at that time he's shrewd. So for all of us in our dealings, it is important to have goodness. And with people who have goodness, then we can just lower our boundaries and be free. But we can't presume that everybody around us is good. Or that because I am good, so bad things won't happen to me. Or bad things shouldn't happen to me. We need to have boundaries. Individual, it could be our personal boundaries based on our particular vulnerabilities. There could be social boundaries based on the particular society that we are living in. And these boundaries are a sign of intelligence. So don't just be good, but be shrewd. Goodness, if goodness is to be protected, it needs around it a boundary of shrewdness. So we definitely don't want to be we don't want to be constantly suspicious of everyone. But in this world, nature is goodness can be dragged down. Now Sita herself never became a bad person. She never flinched in her devotion to Lord Ram. But she was still put in a bad situation. And that's why for each one of us, the boundaries are important. Now, what is the Lakshman Rekha for all of us? That depends on our particular situation. When we are practicing spiritual life, we have certain rules and regulations of spiritual life. So the rules and regulations are like our boundaries. They protect us. And the purpose of the rules and regulations is not so much to restrict. It is to help us to direct ourselves. So that if we have goodness, we want to function along with that goodness. Then say, now we could say rules are, in one sense, in some ways, rules are like boundaries. So what are they meant to do? One level we say they are just simply restricting me. I can't do this, I can't do that. Well, no, their purpose is not to focus, the purpose is not to restrict, their purpose is to direct us. Okay. Within this, you can function smoothly. So within this, you can do whatever you want. And function smoothly, we strengthen the goodness within us. In fact, I talked about goodness. Above goodness is godliness. We are all parts of Krishna. And the more we become connected with him, the more we rise from goodness towards godliness. So as we rise toward godliness, then because of our inner connection with Krishna, we naturally experience joy. He is the source of all happiness. And the more we are connected with him, the more is the happiness that we start experiencing, the fulfillment, the joy we start experiencing in our own lives. So I'll summarize what I discussed today. I discussed broadly 4 points. First was adversity versus atrocity. So adversity occurs by nature, but atrocity is done by people, by some specific cause. And then who are the people who might do atrocity? For that we discussed 3 broad kinds of people. What are the 3 broad kinds? People with goodness, weakness, and wickedness. So these are natures or characteristics which you are born with, but that doesn't mean they will stay where we are. We can go down or we can go up. And in general, progress means from wherever we are, we go upwards. The world today defines progress in terms of external improvement. Gain more wealth, gain more fame. That's important. That's helpful. But even more important is the inner upliftment, rising from wherever we are toward progress. And for this rising upwards, we discuss the role of boundaries. Boundaries not only prevent us from being dragged down by others, boundaries also prevent us from being exploited by others. And we discuss different kinds of boundaries. There could be social boundaries, there could be personal boundaries. So if there are okay. So the purpose of boundaries is basically to protect the goodness within us from being exploited by others. And then in that connection, we discussed how it is important for each one of us to not just be good, but also shrewd. Means protect goodness with shrewdness. So when we do that, we can not only stay protected, but that won't be a restriction and a protection, so that we have a direction, we have space and a velocity for moving towards improving our life, rising even from goodness toward godliness, and therein finding ultimate fulfillment. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare.